Hey everybody, Tony D with another hot take. This one's on Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, as I've said, was going to start infighting with Antifa and the Marxists, and they have. Tim Pool's reporting that at least two of their big leaders in Black Lives Matter have quit, and the reason is too much Marxism. These people have taken over the movement. They've got trained Marxists in the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's become about everything but police brutality. And I'll tell you right now, the Marxist, the Antifa people, the communists, they don't care about black lives. They only care about one thing: power. And to understand why, you have no further to look than the neocons, because they are cut from the same cloth. Justin Raimondo, the late great Justin Raimondo of antiwar.com, did many analysis of the neocons during the Bush administration. And what he tracked the history of these people. And the neocons actually came out of the left. They were known as the Trotskyites. And when things kind of went south and the Cold War kicked up, they slowly started turning towards the right, because the left had kind of dropped the ball, and they wouldn't embrace militarism, which is something these people wanted. So the neocons ended up forming mostly around Bill Kristol's dad, who was, I think his name's Irving Kristol. I think he was the original neocon, the godfather of the neocons. And the conservative movement suddenly had these guys on board who were super militaristic, and we're talking about erasing civil liberties, all because we had to beat the Soviets during the Cold War. And they were about war. And part of the reason they wanted that is, number one, they wanted American hegemony, take over the world, essentially, supervillain stuff. Two, they believed that the only way you could make this work for America in terms of its empire is you had to take some little puny country, throw it against the wall, and show the rest of the countries you mean business. And so it wasn't even about total occupation of the world so much as making everybody fear you. And that was their perspective. They wanted to do this more militarily. They felt like, you know, the people on the left, they're too hippy dippy. They're going to give the whole store away. We're going to be crushed by these people. And what ended up happening is, and what's happening now is, you know, previously they went from Trotskyites on the left to neocons on the right. Well, now it's shifting back to the left again, because you got guys like Bill Kristol and I believe David Frum and a couple other guys who are with neoconish leanings, or neocons outright. They're now very anti-Trump. They're very anti-Trump. Why? They're supposedly conservatives. Well, Raimondo described them as parasites on the body politic. And they sort of latched on to the conservatives and the Republicans, and they were there and they survived, but they didn't really come into power until 9/11. Once 9/11 happened, it was like an explosion of power for the state. And they were there at the right moment, and Bush Jr. Asked them in. And I think part of the reason he asked them in is his father, H.W., never asked them in. He called them the crazies in the basement. They were in power in that they were in Washington, but they never really got to powerful places. But with Bush Jr., that changed. He brought them all in. And I think it was sort of an F you, Dad. I got 2 terms and I brought in the neocons. Look how well I did. I think that was part of it. But, you know, I don't have to go over the train wreck of the Bush administration, I'm sure, for most of you. But now we're seeing the shift. They're going back to the Democrats because they see them as having the power, and they can't infiltrate the Republicans and conservatives anymore. They've been inoculated, because it's like getting a virus. You know, you get it, you're inoculated for the next foreseeable future. So nobody wants to go back to the Bush era, certainly not Trump. And so these neocons are kind of out in the cold. Well, how are they going to make their money? how are they going to gin up a war? Well, let's go to the Democrats. They're perfectly willing to say, oh, we might have to go to war with Russia. We might have to sanction Russia. They're nuts. But the neocons, they're all on board with that. So all they got to do is switch parties. Now they're neoliberals. And they'll say, oh, well, we've always deep down been neoliberals. Even though that's kind of BS. It's not about left or right for them. I don't think it's about Republican or Democrat. It's about power. And the BLM movement has been infiltrated by similar people who they were about power. And the only reason BLM has been chosen is because they can exploit that power. If you don't support Black Lives Matter, what are you, a racist? That's the power. And so many people are afraid of being called racist in this society. That's why they're exploiting it. And they've basically used it to shake down major corporations. Those guys can lose millions if they're perceived as being racist in any way. Look at they've changed they're going to get rid of Aunt Jemima. They're going to get rid of Uncle Ben. They got rid of the Land O'Lakes lady. They're vulnerable because they're out in the public, and these people are ruthless. They don't care about anything other than power, because from their perspective, you get the power and then you make the changes, and then you control reality, essentially. You get to say what goes and what doesn't go, and you make a ton of money doing it. It's interesting to note that Trump brought in John Bolton into his administration. Why did he do that? I think it was to neutralize Bolton. I think he knew very well he was a warmongering maniac, but he brought him in and figured he'd just keep him on a short leash, and for a while that seemed to work. He was like the bad cop to Trump's good cop with regard to North Korea, but eventually he wore out his usefulness and screwed the pooch on the peace deal, and Trump said goodbye. And now look at him, he just turns on a dime, and he writes his book, and these are the kinds of people, I think, these power-hungry people who have infiltrated BLM. They don't care about Black lives. Not at all. They'll say it because they'll say anything to get you to believe them. They'll do anything to get you to be on board. But ultimately, it's about their Marxism. It's about reshaping the world in their vision, where they get to call the shots, where they say what's racist and not racist, where they get to do everything. And it's also connected to the neocons and people in the Marxist community would love to have this power. And where does the power reside in Washington? Well, a lot of it resides in what's called the deep state. And I don't think the deep state is infiltrated by Marxists, but they are infiltrated by people, not infiltrated, but there are people in the deep state who are just power hungry. And some of them have sided with the Democrats, because even though the Democrats are a long shot now, the Democrats are willing to give up anything to get in power, right? So imagine you're one of the deep staters, whether you're in the CIA or FBI or whatever, and you help Biden get elected. My God, do you understand the reward you would be given? You'd be given anything you wanted. You'd be a director of the FBI, director of the CIA. You could call the shots on almost anything at that point, because you would be responsible for getting Biden elected. Even if you had to do terrible, terrible things, like secretly fund, say, a domestic terrorist organization, and overthrow, city governments and defund the police. Who cares? If you're amoral enough, you'll do it. So that's another factor in all this. But what BLM has to do, and I said this before, they have to disavow the Marxists. And if they're not going to disavow the Marxists, then they have to disavow BLM. They have to tell everybody, and they have to shout it to the rooftops. The movement has been taken over by Marxists who have no interest in saving Black lives. They have no interest in stopping police brutality. You can see that when in the Chaz. You can see that by the way they protest. Oh yeah, sure, their mobs will beat the hell out of you if you get caught there. The people in the Chaz, they don't have a problem with guns or walls or being authoritarian. You only have a problem when someone else has the guns and is authoritarian. Oh, then they have all sorts of problems with that. So it's not a utopian vision where everybody's equal and there's no guns and we have a polite society. No, 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 no. It's all about power. These people are power hungry. We told you. We warned you. But you didn't listen. And now you're aligned with these capitalist-hating nutbags who want to burn down statues, who want to do everything but stop the police. And in fact, it's part of their plan. They would like to tear down everything. It's part of the Marxist postmodernist vision. If you tear down all traditions, you tear down the nuclear family. It's on the BLM website. They're against a nuclear family. Imagine being against families. I mean, how warped do you have to be to look at the family union and say, yeah, that's terrible. A mom and dad and kids. Oh my God. Can you get any more monstrous than that? These people are psychotic. And BLM has to distance themselves. I have to go. Joan has seen a Marxist at my front door. I'm going to have to settle things.